Oh, you guys, it's about to get so good. I even have notes so I don't forget anything. Let's connect the dots on the latest scavenger hunt that the universe has put me on. If you're new here, grab a snack because this will be multiple parts, but it will be very interesting. Let's talk about ophiuchus, the 13th key, and suppressed feminine wisdom. Now, you may have noticed that for centuries, humanity has lived in this narrative that worships the number 12. We have 12 months, 12 disciples, 12 zodiac signs, and 12 sort of became this number of order and structure and completion. But what about 13? For a long time, the number 13th held a very different vibration. In fact, the narrative around the number 13th has been demonized in some ways. It was seen as wild and unlucky and chaotic in nature, very mysterious, and yet also connected to the feminine. In addition to that, it is connected to the lunar calendar, corresponding to the 13 moons we experience each year, the 13 cycles of menstruation that mirror the moon's rhythms, and the sacred goddess day, Friday the 13th, which I know you may have had different thoughts of what that day means, but it is actually a day that was originally meant to celebrate Venus, love, femininity, fertility, and feminine sovereignty. But again, over time, the number 13th became shrouded with this unlucky, superstitious energy. So why? Because to honor 13 is to honor the divine feminine, the power of life, death, rebirth, and the mysteries of creation itself. So let's get into ophiuchus, the 13th zodiac sign that has been hidden for centuries. You're going to want to stick around and listen to this, especially if you think you're a Sagittarius. Let's go to part two. Welcome to part two of ophiuchus, the 13th key, and the suppressed feminine wisdom. If this is the first video coming across your feed, save it, watch part one, and come back to it. So let's dive into ophiuchus. What even is it? If you're into astrology, you may know of ophiuchus. It is said to be the 13th zodiac sign that has been diminished and hidden from Western astrology. Now, as an astrologer myself, I have to admit that I have seen this for a bit now, but honestly, I was like, I can't even worry about this hidden sign that I know nothing about yet. When the time comes, I will dive into what this is. Well, the time has come. I didn't think it was going to be something that I dove into until it showed up in the book I'm reading. Now, some of you know I'm currently reading Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which was written by 3 researchers, and it is fascinating. It is taking me a bit to fully digest because there is a lot of information. But color me surprised when I came across a lot of astrology knowledge in their research, including an excerpt on ophiuchus. When discussing a privately printed piece of work called Le Serpent Rouge, I'm assuming the red serpent in French, which also included an alleged genealogy map of the bloodline of Christ, but that's another conversation. It also contained 13 prose poetry, each one correlating to a zodiac sign. Each of these prose poems is no more than a paragraph long, and each corresponds to a sign of the zodiac, a zodiac of 13 signs, with the 13th, ophiuchus, or the serpent holder, inserted between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Narrated in the first person, the 13 prose poems are a type of symbolic or allegorical pilgrimage, commencing with Aquarius and ending with Capricorn. Now, this document was deposited into the library in 1967. When it was actually written is not clear. However, a month after it was released, the 3 authors of The Red Serpent were found. There's a lot there, but again, let's go back to ophiuchus. When I saw its mention in this book, I knew the universe was saying it's time to dive into this. And the fact that it is represented as a serpent holder during a 9-year, the year of the snake, felt a little significant. So let's talk about this sign that nobody really knows. As I mentioned, this sign is positioned between Scorpio and Sagittarius. It is the serpent bearer, meaning it's associated with healing, transformation, and resurrection. It has a mythic figure associated with it named Asclepius, god of medicine, who could even raise people from the dead. But ophiuchus never made it to the 12 zodiac system. It was cut out, omitted, and all of that serpent wisdom cast aside and hidden. Kind of like the demonization of the serpent story in the Garden of Eden. That was a story that turned awakening into one of sin. And now here is a sign that became the one that doesn't belong. In truth, ophiuchus represents the forgotten healer, the one who bridges the path between death and rebirth, shadow and light. And through doing this, the zodiac yet again contributes to this ongoing narrative of stripping away feminine wisdom and power. So let's talk about the history of ophiuchus and the traits associated with this sign that may be your actual zodiac sign. Let's go to part 3. Welcome to part 3 of Ophiuchus, the 13th key and suppressed feminine wisdom. If this is the first video landing on your page, save it, watch the first 2 parts, and come back. Now let's dive a little deeper into Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is a large constellation located near the celestial equator. It's often depicted as a man holding onto a serpent, and it's one of 88 modern recognized constellations. Now, as I mentioned in part 2, Ophiuchus is often identified with Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine, healing, and resurrection. In mythology, it's said that Asclepius was so good at healing and doing what he does with medicine that he could resurrect people from the dead. This made Zeus feel a type of way. And I've touched on Zeus, so we know that he's not necessarily the biggest fan of other people doing way cooler things than him. So that led to his placement among the stars. And the serpent that Asclepius holds represents transformation, renewal, and the mysteries of life and death. Now, astrologically, if your birthday falls between November 29th and December 17th, you would be considered under the sign of Ophiuchus. But again, as I mentioned before, Western astrology does not recognize Ophiuchus as an official sign within the zodiac and sticks to the 12 sign wheel. But if you happen to have a sun sign within Ophiuchus, let's talk about some traits to see if you identify with them, while also noting how timely it is considering the bigger narrative at play. Now, because Ophiuchus sits between Scorpio and Sagittarius, people with this sign tend to carry a unique blend of that energy, and its essence is linked with healing, wisdom, and transformation. Now, if you think of Scorpio and Sagittarius and you make a hybrid of that energy, it's almost like the dark professor. You have that Sagittarian philosopher instinct, the guru, the one that knows, the holder of knowledge. Meanwhile, you have that Scorpio energy, which also holds a lot of occult knowledge. It's within the mysteries, the darkness. So it's kind of a blend of these two energies coming together. This is the healer's archetype, so people who fall under Ophiuchus energy tend to be deeply connected to medicine, holistic practices, energy healing, or some type of shamanic tradition. They tend to be drawn to helping others transform pain into power. They are also very naturally drawn to these life and death cycles, very Scorpio in nature, shadow work, transmutation of energies. They are also very intellectually curious, especially when it comes to philosophy, spirituality, psychology, and esoteric wisdom. Once again, blending those energies together. People with this sign can be seen as very mysterious, powerful, magnetic, and drawing people in quite easily. There's also a rebellious energy. They're not afraid to challenge systems, to challenge growth, both within themselves and the collective. And again, this sign is connected to serpent wisdom. So Kundalini energy, transformation energy, renewal energy, hidden wisdom, and the ability to shed old skin. So if you were to fall under the sign of Ophiuchus, your shadow side could look like being really intense, very secretive, very restless, very impatient when it comes to traditional ideals, or even having an outsider complex. You can also be a little manipulative when it comes to power if it's really unbalanced. Now, in the empowered side, someone with Ophiuchus energy is a healer, a truth seeker, a mystic. This is someone who merges science and spirit, bridging these two worlds that are often pitted against each other. They can be visionaries who guide others on their path to transformation. And so the life path of someone embodying this energy is to become a keeper of that wisdom, to become a channel for the transformation, both for themselves and for those around them. and are often involved in some way with healing arts, spiritual practices, or activism that helps shift the collective paradigm. Yet again, very timely. And because ophiuchus doesn't fit the 12 system astrology zodiac wheel, there is this innate energy of feeling like you don't belong, very much like ophiuchus doesn't belong in the traditional system that we've learned. So, in that sense, it is hidden and kind of lives between worlds, holding and possessing that forgotten knowledge that yearns to be resurrected. Speaking of resurrection, there's someone kind of important that we also need to bring into this conversation. No, it's not who you think. It's actually Mary Magdalene. Let's go to the next part. Welcome to part 4 of Ophiuchus, the 13th key, and suppressed feminine wisdom. If this is the first video that's coming across your page, save it, because there's a lot to talk about before we get here. But I want you to come back. Now, we talked about ophiuchus, we talked about the number 13, we talked about how it's been suppressed and demonized, and something else that is connected to all of this is Mary Magdalene. Now, again, this is a thread that's being pulled. This is a scavenger hunt, and we are noticing patterns. So we are seeing a pattern with the number 13, the suppression of it, the demonization of it, the changed narrative in order to control the perception of it. We are also seeing how that affects the natural flow and system of the world that we live in, creating a calendar system that does not align with the 13 moons, basing a lot of astrology in the West without considering this very potent sign that happens to align with a lot of the energy we are experiencing collectively at this time: healing, transformation, kundalini awakenings, death and rebirth. Now we see this pattern even in spiritual history. Mary Magdalene, who walked alongside Christ and who held a position that was suppressed in a lot of holy texts and scriptures, is oftentimes considered the 13th disciple, whose voice and role was deliberately diminished. I wonder why. Instead of being honored for the fact that she was a teacher, a priestess, a keeper of hidden wisdom, a divine counterpart, she was branded as a sinner, a prostitute, and her sovereignty was forced into silence. Her story was manipulated and rebranded to yet again take control of the narrative and to suppress the feminine wisdom within holy knowledge and within ourselves. Like Ophiuchus, Mary Magdalene carried this sort of forbidden gnosis, teachings of sacred union, of wholeness, and of balancing the feminine and the masculine within. And just like the number 13, she was cast as dangerous, unlucky, and disruptive. Bad luck to the patriarchy. But as we are seeing now more than ever, what has been suppressed cannot be destroyed, and sooner or later it will awaken and rise to be remembered once again. And so we are at a time now when we are seeing the resurgence of the 13th key, the rise of Ophiuchus, reminding us of the strong astrological imprint that has to do with healing, renewal, and medicine. The reclamation of Friday the 13th as the day of the goddess and not a day of unlucky superstition. Honoring Mary Magdalene as the teacher, healer, priestess, and embodiment of the divine feminine that she was. And the number 13 being restored as a symbol for power, mystery, and feminine cycles. When you put all of this together, it becomes clearer than ever that we are living now in a time where the divine feminine energy within the collective unconscious and within each of us, gender does not matter, is returning. What was hidden in the shadows is now rising to light. Ophiuchus is calling us to heal. Mary Magdalene is calling us to remember. And the number 13, which reduces to the number 4, structure, stability, security, a strong foundation, is calling us to reclaim the wholeness within ourselves, which can then be reflected within society. See, with the systems we've had in place up until this point, we would never experience balance, order, and justice because we were continuously denying, suppressing, and silencing an entire other half of the equation. By reclaiming 13, we reclaim the missing key. By honoring Ophiuchus, we honor the serpent wisdom of transformation, renewal, and rebirth. And by remembering Mary Magdalene, we restore balance to a very sacred story. It is now our duty to embrace what was once forgotten in order to experience the wholeness that we claim we desire within ourselves, within our communities, and within the world that we live in.